All right, ready to dive deep into some science.
Let's do it.
Today, we're tackling a fact you've probably heard a million times, the one about our blood vessels being able to stretch 100,000
Oh,
kilometers.
yeah, the whole enough to circle the Earth twice thing.
Exactly. It sounds pretty impressive, right? Like you hear that and you're like, whoa, my body is amazing.
It definitely makes you think.
But here's the thing. As we started researching for this deep dive, we wanted to find, the actual scientific basis for that number. And guess what?
Right.
Finding solid modern research on the exact length of the human circulatory system was way harder than we thought it'd be.
Really? So are you saying we don't even know how long our blood vessels actually are?
Well, it's not that simple. I mean, we know a lot about the circulatory system, arteries, veins, capillaries, all that good stuff.
Right, the basics.
But when it comes to the total length, there's actually a lot of uncertainty.
Huh. That's weird. Why would that be so hard to figure out?
Well, think about it, especially when you're talking about capillaries, those tiny blood vessels,
Yeah, they're microscopic, right?
super tiny. So, back in the day when scientists were first trying to measure these things, the tools and knowledge were limited. Imagine trying to measure something thinner than a human hair.
No kidding.
Even today, with all the advanced technology we have, getting an accurate measurement of the entire circulatory system, it's really tough.
So you're saying some of those early estimates could be, well, a bit off.
Let's just say there's a lot of room for error. And what happens when a number, even a potentially inaccurate one, gets repeated enough?
Uh-oh. It becomes fact in people's minds.
Pretty much like a game of telephone where the message gets distorted with every retelling.
I see. So we might be clinging to this 100,000 kilometer figure based on some old, maybe not so reliable data.
Exactly. But here's the craziest part. We reached out to top cardiovascular scientists thinking they'd have the definitive answer.
The experts, right?
You'd think so, but even they were like, measuring the circulatory system accurately, that's a huge challenge.
So even the top researchers aren't totally sure.
Nope. Modern studies do point to a lower number, closer to 60,000 kilometers for adults. But even that's not a rock-solid figure.
So it's safe to say that 100,000 kilometers might be an exaggeration.
It's looking that way, which begs the question, why does this myth persist so stubbornly?
Yeah, good question. Why do we cling to stuff like this, even when the evidence is shaky?
Well, I think it has something to do with how our brains are wired, right? Like big, impressive numbers, we love those.
Makes sense. Easy to remember, too.
And the image of your blood vessels wrapping around the planet, come on, that's just cool. But maybe we should be a little more skeptical of these fun facts, especially when they sound almost too good to be true.
Agreed. I mean, there's even a psychological concept called fluency that plays into this. It's basically the idea that information that's easy to process, easy to understand, feels more truthful to us, even if there's not a lot of evidence to back it up.
So the easier it rolls off the tongue, the more we're likely to believe it. That's kind of scary, actually.
It can be, especially in this age of misinformation.
Right. But hey, even though the experts aren't 100% sure about the true length of our blood vessels, this whole investigation has still been pretty eye-opening, wouldn't you say?
For sure. I mean, it's made me appreciate just how complex and mysterious our bodies really are.
Totally. And how much we still don't know. But what happened when you guys started really digging deep, trying to find some more concrete answers?
Oh man, that's where things got really interesting. Let me tell you, trying to track down solid info on this blood vessel thing turned into a real wild goose chase.
You're kidding. So it was like a full-blown investigation.
Oh yeah, we were digging through research papers, calling up scientists, even trying to find some of those original studies that mentioned this 100,000 kilometer number.
Sounds intense. What'd you find?
It was honestly kind of frustrating. Like nobody wanted to give us a straight answer, emails going unanswered, calls getting bounced around. It's like this weird secret society of blood vessel measurers or something.
No way. You'd think for such a fundamental thing, there'd be like clear documentation, right?
You'd think, right. But nope, it was like pulling teeth just to get someone to even acknowledge the question.
Wow. Okay. So does this mean we're never going to know the true length of our blood vessels? Is it just going to be one of life's big mysteries?
I wouldn't say never. You know, science is always evolving.
That's true.
What might have been considered a fact 50 years ago, it might get totally revised or even completely debunked as we get better tools and more knowledge. And when we're talking about something as complex as the human body, there's always going to be stuff we don't fully understand.
Makes sense. So even if we can't nail down the exact length of our blood vessels, like what can we take away from all this digging around?
I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of, like, healthy skepticism, you know? Don't just accept any fact you hear, even if it sounds super impressive or comes from a source you trust.
Especially in the age of the internet, right?
Oh, totally. I mean, there's so much information out there, and a lot of it's, well, questionable. So this whole deep dive has been a great reminder to really think critically about the things we hear and read.
And to not be afraid to dig a little deeper to find the truth.
Exactly. Plus, it highlights how science works. You know, sometimes things are messy and there's not always a clear-cut answer.
Right. Like measuring the circulatory system. Turns out that's incredibly hard to do, even with all the fancy technology we have today.
Yeah, so maybe the 100,000-kilometer thing is exaggerated,
Probably.
but that doesn't mean our bodies aren't still totally incredible and complex.
True. It's still mind-blowing to think about 60,000 kilometers of blood vessels all packed into our bodies. That's still enough to stretch across the U.S. a bunch of times.
Really is remarkable.
So maybe we didn't get that black and white answer,
Yeah,
but we learned a ton about science, measurement, and even a bit of psychology along the way.
I'd say so. And sometimes those unexpected detours are what make the journey so interesting.
Totally agree. But I gotta ask, after all this research, all this back and forth, what's your final verdict on this whole blood vessel myth? Can we officially debunk it?
I think it's safe to say, based on everything we've looked at, that the 100,000 kilometers claim, it's very likely an exaggeration.
Okay, so no wrapping our blood vessels around the Earth twice. Bummer.
Oh,
But they're still pretty amazing. This whole thing has honestly made me super curious about what other so-called facts out there might not be so factual, you know?
that's a great question and something we should all be thinking about. The world's full of information, and it's up to us to sort through it all and figure out what's real and what's not.
Right, so it's like a call to action for all our listeners.
Absolutely.
Don't just take things at face value, question everything, be curious, and embrace the fact that we might not always have all the answers.
That's where the real excitement lies.
Yeah.
The pursuit of knowledge, the constant discovery, that's what makes life interesting.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, folks, there you have it, our deep dive into the mystery of blood vessel length.
We went from the Earth-circling myth to the nitty-gritty of scientific research and back.
And hopefully learned a thing or two about critical thinking along the way. It's amazing how one little question about blood vessel length turned into this whole, epic journey of discovery.
Right. We started with this crazy myth about circling the Earth and ended up diving deep into, how science really works, the challenges of measurement, all that good stuff.
And hopefully our listeners are walking away with, a healthy dose of skepticism.
Exactly. Questioning what they hear, digging a little deeper, not just taking things at face value.
Especially when it comes to science, right? It's all about constantly updating our knowledge as we learn more.
Absolutely. And that's actually what makes it so exciting. There's always more to uncover, more mysteries to solve.
Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave our listeners with a little something to ponder. We debunked the 100,000-kilometer thing, but it kind of makes you wonder, what other facts out there might not be so factual,
Ooh, good one. Like what other commonly accepted truths could use a little, deep dive investigation of their own?
Right. Who knows what other scientific myths are lurking out there, just waiting to be busted.
It's like a never-ending quest for knowledge, and everyone's invited to join in.
Love that. So to all our listeners out there, stay curious, keep questioning, and most importantly, never stop exploring.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the world of blood vessels and scientific mysteries.
See you next time.